It started with the sound of a dog growling in the dark. Not the kind of growl you hear from behind a fence, but low, steady, and close enough to feel in your bones. By the time Lena reached the alley, the rain was still dripping from the fire. Escapes. And Ranger stood between a frightened little girl and a man, whose smile was nothing but danger. That moment changed everything. Because sometimes, a single heartbeat is all it takes for a quiet life to turn into a war you never asked for. And if you want to know how it ends, if you want to follow every twist, every betrayal, and every small victory, make sure you subscribe now. Trust me. You won't want to miss what comes next. The city was like a two-part symphony, one side crisp and bright, the other low and dissonant. Out west, morning light slipped between the glass walls of high-rise towers, glinting off rooftop pools and green balconies. People sipped their lattes by the window, fingers sliding across gleaming tablets, the air around them impossibly clean, as if dust itself had been outlawed. Just one block east, heat from a bus exhaust mixed with the sour damp of trash and cigarette. Smoke rising thick over corrugated tin roofs, sagging tarps, and brick walls stained with years of neglect. Here, balconies were just sagging clotheslines. The faint clink of old wind chimes beat out the street vendor's call from the corner. Maya Carter sat on the concrete steps of Lucky Wash Laundromat, knees drawn up, a worn sketchbook balanced on her lap. Her dark brown skin caught the sunlight. Hair tied back in a messy puff. Her eyes sharp but quiet tracked every detail around her, storing them away like she might need them later. At her feet, Ranger, a retired canine, rested his head against her shin, ears twitching at the occasional sound from the alley. Ranger had once been the pride of the city's canine unit. His coat still shone, a swirl of sable and black, except for the patch shaved bare around a faded scar at his neck, the mark of a bullet from his last mission. To Maya, Ranger wasn't just a dog. He was the one friend who never judged, never left. From the steps, Maya could see the street like a split screen. Across the road, the Brewhouse Cafe was opening. A crew of young baristas in crisp uniforms lined up buttery croissants in the glass case. A man in a steel gray suit leaned in the doorway, phone pressed to his ear, glancing now and then toward Maya's side of the street, where the city kept what it didn't want to show off. Near the wall of a shuttered auto shop, Eli Thompson, battered army jacket hanging loose, sat in his wheelchair. His legs were gone, pant legs tied neatly just above the knees. Across his lap was a piece of cardboard in thick, black marker. Fought for this country, just need a meal. The man in the suit crossed the street, not to help, but to signal someone behind him. A tall, broad-shouldered police officer stepped forward. Everyone here knew him, Travis Malone. He never needed to raise his voice. The way he looked at people, sorting them into useful and trash, was enough. "Mr. Thompson," Malone said, voice low but sharp enough to carry. "How many times have we talked about this? You can't sit in front of this store." Eli looked up, tired eyes still steady. "I'm not blocking anyone. Just sitting here to rest." Malone's mouth curved like he'd just heard a bad joke. "Rules are rules, you know that." He motioned to two younger officers at his back. Maya's grip on her sketchbook tightened. Ranger gave a low, short growl, just enough to make Malone glance his way. That's when the black SUV rolled up to the brewhouse. Out stepped Victoria Holly, her blonde hair catching the morning light, her cream dress tailored to perfection. She scanned the street with open distaste, as if she'd walked into the wrong neighborhood entirely. Her gaze landed on Maya, lingering from her curls to her worn sneakers. Before, she turned to Malone and murmured something Maya didn't need to hear the words. She knew that look, the cold, clinical dismissal she'd grown used to but never stopped feeling in her chest. Down the block, Lena Carter, Maya's mother, was heading home. Still in her fatigues, rucksack slung over one shoulder, she'd spent the last 6 months on a military logistics detail. She had been picturing this reunion for weeks. She didn't know that in just a few hours, her daughter and the old dog at her side would be dragged into something dirtier than any battlefield Lena had ever seen. The breeze carried the warm scent of fresh pastry from the west and the sour tang of street trash from the east. Two worlds parallel, pretending not to see each other until someone decided to make them collide. Lena spotted her daughter before Maya noticed her. The girl was hunched over her sketchbook. Ranger sprawled beside her like an old soldier on guard duty. For a moment, Lena just stood there, letting herself breathe it in the ordinariness of it, the proof that not everything in this city was poisoned. But the scene across the street cut into that moment like glass. Eli's wheelchair was being nudged backward by one of Malone's officers, not shoved just enough to make it look reasonable. Enough to get him out of sight of the cafe's patio tables. "You don't have to do this," Eli said, his voice carrying, steady but worn. "Yes, we do," Malone replied, not even looking at him. His eyes were on Victoria Holland now, who gave him the smallest of nods. Like she was approving a well-trained staff member, Victoria turned to enter the cafe, but her gaze flicked back toward Maya. It lingered for just a second too long. Maya felt it, an unspoken verdict, before she even realized she was holding her breath. Lena started forward, crossing the street with the weight of someone who'd marched into gunfire before. "Maya," she called. Maya's head shot up, eyes going wide. "Mom!" She scrambled to her feet, Ranger following, tail thumping once against the step before settling at a low wag. They met halfway, Lena dropping to one knee to pull her daughter in. She felt the slight tremor in Maya's shoulders, the kind she recognized from soldiers fresh out of a firefight. "You okay?" Lena asked quietly. Maya nodded, but her eyes darted to Eli and back again. "They're making him leave. He wasn't doing anything." Lena looked past her daughter, locking eyes with Malone. He held her gaze for half a beat, then offered the kind of smile that wasn't a smile at all. "Good to see you back, Sergeant Carter," he said. The title was deliberate, a reminder he knew exactly who she was, and that it didn't matter. "Here, still the same city, huh?" Lena replied. "Just keeping it safe," Malone said, voice even. "We've got a lot going on today. In fact," he glanced at Ranger, "your dog there could be useful. We're running a community safety exercise later. Could use a good canine presence. The kid could help too. Nice public demo." Maya's stomach tightened. She didn't like the way he said the kid, like she was a tool to be checked out and returned. Lena straightened slowly. "We'll pass." Malone's eyes narrowed, but his smile stayed. "Think about it. Good way to show you're still part of the team." Victoria reappeared in the cafe doorway, a paper cup in hand. "Is there a problem, officer?" "No problem, ma'am," Malone said smoothly. "Just extending an invitation." Her gaze slid over Lena's fatigues, then to Maya. "I'm sure they'll do the right thing," she said before stepping back inside. "The right thing." Lena had heard that phrase in combat zones, in briefing rooms, in casualty reports. It never meant what it was supposed to. As Malone and his officers moved on, Eli wheeled himself back to the wall. Maya went to him without hesitation, handing over the sandwich she'd been saving for herself. He gave her a weary smile. "You're your mother's kid," Eli said. Ranger rested his head in Eli's lap for a moment, as if to confirm the bond. Lena watched them, the breeze carrying that split scent again, fresh bread from the west, garbage from the east. Two halves of the same city, pretending not to touch. She had no way of knowing that Malone wasn't done with his invitation. By sundown, Maya and Ranger would be standing in a place where those two halves collided, and neither side cared. Who got crushed in the middle? The rest of the morning slid by under a sky that couldn't decide whether it wanted to be sunny or gray. Lena tried to shake off Malone's presence, but it stuck in the back of her mind like the tang of gunpowder after a training exercise. She took Maya and Ranger back to their small apartment above the laundromat, 2 rooms, One bathroom, the hum of the dryers below bleeding through the floor. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, and it was the one place where Lena felt she could put her back against the wall. And no one was behind her. Maya settled at the kitchen table. Sketchbook open again. Ranger sprawled on the rug, his breathing slow and heavy. Lena unpacked the few things she'd brought back, mostly ration bars, a new pair of boots, a scarf she'd bartered from a medic in Kandahar. She placed it gently on Maya's chair. "For you," Lena said. Maya smiled faintly, fingers brushing the soft fabric. "Smells like the desert." Lena didn't tell her that was because it had been through more sandstorms than she could count. She just nodded and busied herself with making coffee. The knock came at noon, 3 sharp raps. Ranger's head lifted instantly. Lena opened the door to find one of Malone's younger officers standing there, all polite grin and mirrored sunglasses. "Ma'am," Officer Malone wanted to confirm. "If you'd be joining the exercise. Starts in an hour. Great community event, press will be there. Good for the neighborhood to see familiar faces." "I already said no," Lena replied. The officer shrugged. "Just doing my job, ma'am. It'd mean a lot to the department. And," he glanced at Ranger, "we've got gear ready for the dog. He'll be treated like royalty." Maya looked up from her sketchbook. "Can we, Mom, just to see?" Lena hesitated. Every instinct told her Malone's offer wasn't clean. But Maya had been cooped up for months, and Ranger hadn't worked a field in years. Maybe she thought it was just a PR stunt, annoying but harmless. "Fine," Lena said finally. "But I'm coming too." The community safety exercise turned out to be held in an abandoned park on the edge of the industrial district. Rusted swing sets swayed in the wind, weeds pushing through the cracked basketball court. Several patrol cars were parked at odd angles, their light bars flashing in idle pulses. Malone was there, all smiles for the small crowd of onlookers and a local news crew. He greeted Lena like they were old friends, then crouched to scratch Ranger behind the ears. "Still got the old fire in him," Malone said. "Perfect." He explained the demo in broad strokes, how Ranger would help simulate tracking a suspect, how Maya could walk with him to make it look authentic. But there were no suspects in sight, no safety cones, no other K9 teams. Something in Lena's chest tightened. "Where's the rest of your unit?" "They're around," Malone said easily, glancing toward the tree line. "We keep it fluid, realistic." Before she could press, Malone was already walking Maya and Ranger toward the far end of the park, a few of his officers falling in behind them. Lena followed, every step heavier than the last. They stopped near a row of crumbling picnic tables. Malone pointed toward the chain-link fence at the back. "When you hear my signal, just start walking that way, nice and slow. Let Ranger take the lead." Maya nodded, hand resting on the dog's back. Ranger's ears twitched. Then Lena noticed it, the faint shape of 2 figures beyond the fence, moving low, their eyes locked on Maya and the dog. They weren't officers. Her stomach dropped. Lena's hand moved to Maya's shoulder before she even realized it. "Stay close to me," she said, voice low enough that only her daughter could hear. Malone caught the motion. "Relax, Sergeant. We've got eyes everywhere." He gestured lazily toward the rooftops beyond the park, as if that would reassure her. But Lena had been in enough combat zones to know the difference between control and chaos. And what she saw in those 2 figures' movements wasn't part of a choreographed police drill. It was predatory. One of them adjusted something under his jacket. The metallic glint, brief but unmistakable, made her pulse spike. "Signal in." 3. Malone's voice rang out. Ranger's head snapped toward the fence, muscles tightening under his coat. His low growl was nothing like the half-hearted rumble he gave strangers on the street. This was the deep, warning note of a dog that had been here before. 2. Lena stepped forward, putting herself between Maya and the fence. "Malone, call it off." He ignored her. 1. A sharp crack split the air, not a firework. Not a starter pistol. Ranger lunged, dragging Maya down with him just as the chain link shuddered from the impact of the shot. The bark that tore from his throat was pure fury, cut short by a yelp as he staggered, a dark stain blooming at the edge of his old scar. Maya! Lena dropped to the ground, pulling her daughter under her body. She could hear the scramble of boots, shouting, some of it police, some of it not. Malone was shouting into his radio, but Lena noticed he wasn't looking at the shooters. He was watching her. She met his eyes, and in that half second she understood. This wasn't a drill gone wrong. It had never been a drill at all. 2 officers rushed in, hauling the shooters down in a practice takedown that felt rehearsed. Too clean, too fast. Ranger limped to Maya's side, pressing his head against her chest as if to make sure she was still breathing. His fur was warm and slick under Lena's hand. By the time an ambulance pulled up, Malone was already telling a cluster of bystanders how heroically the department had protected the community today. The news cameras caught every word except the truth. Lena kept her arm around Maya, eyes never leaving Malone. She didn't know the full shape of what he'd done, but she knew this. He had used her child and her dog as bait. And as long as he stood there smiling for the cameras, he thought he'd gotten away with it. Not yet. Lena thought. Not yet. The smell of antiseptic clung to the air like something alive, crawling into Lena's nose and refusing to leave. She sat in the hard plastic chair beside the metal table, her elbows on her knees, hands clasped tight enough that her knuckles had gone white. Across from her, Maya sat on the edge of the examination bed, her legs swinging just above the floor. Ranger lay curled up at her feet, a square of gauze taped over the side of his neck. His breathing was slow, but Lena could see the occasional twitch in his pause pain. Maybe, or some echo of whatever he'd felt out there yesterday. Maya was quiet, too quiet. Not the usual aftershock of a kid who'd been scared. This was different. She was looking somewhere far past the white walls, somewhere Lena couldn't follow. "You're sure you're okay?" Lena asked again, softer this time. Maya nodded but didn't look up. They said it was part of the exercise. On the news, that's what they said. Lena felt the old military part of her, the one trained to keep emotions under lock wrestle with the mother part. She wanted to tell Maya the truth, to say the word bait out loud, but the girl's voice was so thin that it caught in her throat. "They lie," Lena said finally. "Sometimes people in uniforms lie." The exam room door opened and the vet tech, a young man with sleeves of faded tattoos, stepped in. "Your dog's stable," he said, kneeling to scratch Ranger's ear. "Bullet grazed him. Missed anything vital. He'll be sore for a while." Lena let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Thanks." The tech's eyes shifted, lowering his voice. "Not that you asked, but those guys weren't from around here. I've been patching up police dogs for years." That wasn't a demo. He didn't wait for her response, just left the room, letting the door click shut behind him. By the time they stepped out into the pale morning light, the city was awake in all its fractured glory. Delivery trucks rumbled past the glistening cafe windows on one side of the street, while a man with a shopping cart picked through a dumpster on the other. The sound of the cart's squeaky wheel followed them for half a block. Maya held Ranger's leash, her other hand shoved into the pocket of Lena's jacket. They walked in silence until they reached the corner, near Lucky Wash. That's where they saw Eli. He was in the same spot as yesterday, wheelchair angled toward the morning sun, cup of coffee steaming in his lap. But there was a new bruise under his left eye, swelling just enough to catch the light. "What happened?" Lena asked, already knowing. "Just a friendly reminder from the city," Eli said, smiling without humor. "One of Malone's boys didn't like me watching yesterday. Sighed I was making the neighborhood look bad for the cameras." Maya's jaw tightened. She crouched to hug him without a word, Ranger leaning into the embrace. "You should file a complaint," Lena said. Eli snorted. To who? The same guys who sent him? She knew he was right. In the army, you had a chain of command. Out here, the chain was a noose if you pulled the wrong way. They reached the apartment stairs when a voice called from across the street. Sergeant Carter. Lena turned to see Victoria Holly standing beside her SUV, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. She was dressed like the day before, immaculate and deliberate, but there was something in her posture hesitation. Maybe that hadn't been there yesterday. I saw the news, Victoria said, stepping closer. They made it sound clean. But I was there. I know it wasn't. Lena said nothing. I have connections, Victoria went on. People who could look into this, off the record. The offer hung in the air like smoke. Why? Lena asked. Victoria's gaze slid to Maya, then back. Because if they can use a child like that, they can use anyone. That night, after Maya was asleep with Ranger curled at her feet, Lena sat at the kitchen table with a single lamp burning. She spread out what she had, scraps of notes, the memory of faces, the vet tech's words, Victoria's offer, outside. The city hummed with its two voices, the laughter of rooftop bars, and the coughs of the street below. Somewhere between them was the truth. And Lena intended to find it. The next morning was the kind of brittle cold that made every breath feel like it might crack in your lungs. The laundromat downstairs was already humming, steam fogging the front windows. Maya was quiet at breakfast. She stirred the same spoonful of cereal over and over until it went soggy. Ranger lay at her feet, chin on his paws, watching her, the way dogs do when they know something's wrong but can't fix it. You don't have to go, Lena said. Maya didn't look up. If I stay home, it's like they win. Lena thought about the bruised look in her daughter's eyes yesterday. The way Malone had said the kid like she wasn't even a person. She hated letting Maya walk back into a building where half the kids carried their parents' prejudices. Like lunchboxes, but she also knew her daughter's stubborn streak. It was the same one that kept Lena moving in the desert heat. With 60 pounds of gear on her back, she walked her to the school gates anyway. The crossing guard waved, cars idled in double-parked lines. It all looked so ordinary. But as soon as Maya stepped through the doors, a boy's voice rang out down the hall. Hey, TV girl. Where's your bulletproof dog? A few kids laughed. Maya kept walking, shoulders tight. Inside her homeroom, she found a sketch she'd left in her desk, creased, torn, and now with the words "Bait Girl" scrawled across the top in black marker. Back on the street, Lena stopped by Eli's spot. He wasn't there. She found him a block away, in front of a boarded-up grocery store, talking to a woman in a heavy coat whose shopping cart was stacked with blankets and canned goods. Morning, Lena said. Eli turned, smiling just enough to soften the lines in his face. Lena, this is Marcy. She keeps the whole block alive in winter. Marcy laughed, a short, dry sound. Don't let him fool you. I just have the cart. They talked a while, the way people do when time isn't the most valuable currency they have. Lena learned that Eli had been in the same unit as her friend Caleb overseas, that he'd come back with half his body and none of the VA paperwork he was promised. They said my file was incomplete, Eli said. Like maybe my legs just walked off on their own. Marcy shook her head. They do it on purpose. Less paperwork means less payout. The wind cut sharp around the corner. Lena zipped her jacket and tried not to think about how many more Eli's and Marcy's there were, invisible until someone decided they were inconvenient. That afternoon, Lena stopped by the corner store for coffee filters. Inside, two men stood by the register arguing in low, tight voices. She caught enough to know they were talking about yesterday's incident. Shouldn't even have that dog in public if it's trained to attack, one said. The other shook his head. You didn't see it, he was protecting the kid. Or he was just doing what he's taught. You think they retire those dogs because they're harmless. They went quiet when they noticed Lena. She paid for her filters and left, but the words stuck. It wasn't the first time she'd heard people turn a victim into a threat, just to make themselves comfortable. That night, a local news segment aired a heavily edited clip of the park. It showed Ranger barking, then a quick cut to officers tackling the shooters. No mention of Maya walking point. No mention of how the bullet came within inches of her head. On the neighborhood's online forum, the arguments exploded. Some called Ranger a hero. Others called him dangerous. One post read, "These animals are trained to bite first, ask questions later. Why risk our kids?" Lena closed the laptop. She knew how fast stories could rot in the sun when no one bothered to cover them. But she also knew this Ranger's scar wasn't the only one worth showing. The third day after the park incident, Lena found an envelope slid under her apartment door. No name, no return address, just her own written in blocky, unfamiliar letters. Inside was a single flash drive. She stared at it for a long minute before booting up the old laptop she kept for things she didn't want tied to her main accounts. The screen flickered to life, the folder inside labeled with nothing but the date of the community safety exercise. When she opened it, her stomach tightened. It was raw footage, shaky, probably shot from a phone tucked into a jacket. The video showed exactly what she'd seen. Maya and Ranger walking point, no safety cones, no backup in sight. Then the figures at the fence, the glint of the weapon, the shot. Ranger lunging. Maya hitting the ground. At the end, just before the camera jerked away, Malone was visible in the background, not rushing to Maya's side, but speaking calmly into his radio. Lena closed the laptop, the taste of copper in her mouth. That afternoon, her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. "Sergeant Carter?" The voice was cool, clipped Victoria Hawley. "We need to meet," Victoria said. "There's a coffee shop on Madison. Back table, 3 o'clock. Lena almost hung up, but curiosity had its claws in her now. The coffee shop was all reclaimed. Wood and Edison bulbs, the kind of place where a muffin cost more than a bag of groceries on Lena's block. Victoria was already there, immaculate as ever, a leather folder on the table. "I have friends in places Malone doesn't want noticed," she said without preamble. "That flash drive? That's just the start. You sent it." Victoria didn't confirm, didn't deny. "If I'm going to help you, you need to understand something. Malone isn't just a bad cop. He's useful to people with money. That makes him hard to touch." Lena leaned back. "Why do you care?" Victoria hesitated. "Because I grew up 2 streets from where you live now. And I know what happens when people like Malone decide a neighborhood's worth more without the people in it." They didn't notice the man in the corner booth until the camera flash went off. He was grinning, phone angled just right to catch both of them in frame. By evening, the photo was online under a headline, "Local hero dog's owner in talks with city donors." The story twisted itself in knots, some claiming Lena was selling Ranger's story for money, others saying she was making deals to keep the department quiet. Maya saw it on her phone before Lena could stop her. "They think you're working with him," she said, voice cracking. "I'm not," Lena said. "But they don't care, do they?" Lena looked at Ranger lying on the rug, head tilted like he was trying to follow the conversation. The scar on his neck caught the lamplight. No, people didn't care about the truth. They cared about the story that made them feel safe, even if it was a lie. The next morning, Lena stepped out to find Malone leaning against a patrol car across the street. "Morning, Sergeant," he called. "Quite the press you're getting." She crossed over. "You set that up?" Malone's smile was thin. "I don't need to. You're doing a fine job on your own. Maybe stop meeting with certain people if you don't want folks to get the wrong idea." "This about Holly?" He shrugged. "It's about the fact that you're not playing ball. And when people don't play ball in this town, they get benched." Lena took a step closer. "You used my kid, my dog. That's not ball, Malone, that's bait." His eyes hardened for just a moment before the smile slid back into place. "Careful, Sergeant. Words like that have consequences." By noon, a local TV station was running a feel-good segment, Retired Canine Saves Girl in Simulated Training Scenario. Footage of Ranger limping into Maya's arms played over syrupy music, the voiceover calling him a symbol of community safety. Didn't mention the shooters. They didn't mention the bullet that could have killed Maya, but the cameras kept showing up. People stopped Lena on the street to take pictures with Ranger. A bakery dropped off a cake shaped like a paw print. Every smile, every pat on the head made Lena's jaw tighten. They weren't honoring what Ranger had done. They were burying the truth of why he'd had to do it. By the weekend, the neighborhood had split into two camps. The first hung handmade "Thank you Ranger" signs in store windows, kids drawing paw prints and colored chalk on the sidewalks. The second whispered in corners, their voices sharp, "That dog's a weapon. What if next time it's not just a bad guy?" Lena felt both sides watching her every time she walked Ranger down the block. On Saturday morning, she stopped at Marcy's cart to drop off a bag of groceries. Eli was there too, his chair parked close enough to block the wind. They'd become an odd little trio. Lena, the soldier still wearing her uniform. Eli, the soldier stripped of everything but his pride. And Marcy, who kept everyone fed even when her own shelves were bare. "You seen the video?" Marcy asked, eyes narrowing. Lena stiffened. "What video?" Eli pulled a battered phone from his jacket. He played the flash drive footage, her flash drive footage now watermarked with a blog's logo and racking up views. "I didn't post it," Lena said. "Doesn't matter," Eli replied. "It's out now, and it's gonna burn." The comments scrolled like a wildfire, some calling Malone a criminal, others calling Lena reckless for having her daughter there in the first place. "You're in it now," Marcy said. "And you're not getting out clean." That night, Lena got a text from an unknown number. "If you want the rest, meet me tomorrow. Same place you met Halle. Come alone." She didn't answer, but she didn't delete it either. Sunday morning, Maya was slow to get ready for church. She wasn't much for sermons, but she liked the choir, and Ranger liked the attention. Today, though, she sat on the couch with her knees pulled up, hoodie hood over her head. "Don't want to go?" Lena asked. "They'll stare. They'll talk." "Let them talk," Lena said. But her voice was softer than the words. At the church, it happened. Before they even got inside, a woman in a pressed floral dress bent down to pet Ranger, then pulled her hand back like she'd touched something hot. "I heard he's trained to take down suspects," the woman said. "That's safe for kids?" Maya's hands tightened on Ranger's leash. "He's safe for me," the woman smiled thinly. "That's not the same thing, sweetheart." Back home, Lena sat at the kitchen table, Ranger's head heavy in her lap. The flash drive was still in the drawer, but now it wasn't the only copy in the world. Someone else had the rest, maybe worse, maybe better, and they wanted her to come get it. If she went public, she knew what would happen. Malone would bury her in countersuits, the department would spin it, and Maya would pay the price at school. If she stayed quiet, the lie would stand. Ranger shifted, letting out a low groan. His eyes met hers, steady and unblinking. Lena had seen that look before in men about to run into fire because it was the only way through. "Yeah," she said to the dog. "I know." The cafe on Madison looked different in the morning, quieter, softer light filtering through the big front windows. Lena chose a table near the back, facing the door. Old habit. The man who walked in didn't fit the picture she'd been building in her head. No dark coat, no hat pulled low. He wore a faded flannel shirt, jeans that had seen better years, and a messenger bag slung across his chest. His hair was too neat for someone who lived on the street, but his eyes had that same alertness Lena had seen in soldiers. And people with a reason to look over their shoulders. He sat without asking. "You're Carter. And you are?" Doesn't matter. What matters is I used to wear a badge. Not in this city, but close enough. And I know Malone. Lena didn't move, didn't blink. He's not just running errands for City Hall, the man continued. He's part of a cleanup operation, unofficial, off the books. They call it urban renewal. Sounds nice, right? What it really means is they push out the people who make a place look undesirable. Push out how? Sometimes they harass you until you leave. Sometimes they set you up so you don't have a choice. Sometimes, he paused. Sometimes they make sure you're not around to be a problem anymore. Lena thought of Eli's bruise, of Marcy's cart always moving to avoid tickets, of Maya's name in black marker across her sketch. And the park? She asked. That was staged to scare people into thinking the block isn't safe. Gives the city a reason to increase police presence and start property seizures. And you, he tapped the table with 2 fingers. You were the perfect image. Decorated vet, single mom, black kid, retired K9. You hit every note. Until the dog got shot and the story stopped being clean. He slid a second flash drive across the table. That's everything I've got. Video, audio, names. Some of it's ugly. Lena pocketed the drive before she even thought about it. Why give it to me? Because you've got 2 things I don't: media attention and nothing left to lose. You think I've got nothing to lose? He met her gaze. If you're going to take on Malone, you better act like it. Outside, the air felt heavier. She scanned the street, every shadow suddenly a little too sharp. Ranger was waiting in the truck, tail thumping against the seat when she opened the door. Maya was at school, and Lena hated leaving her there while this weight sat in her pocket. She didn't make it home before the first sign she'd been made. A black SUV in the rear view, 2 cars back. Too close for too long. At the next light, the passenger window of the SUV rolled down just enough for her to see the man inside uniform, dark glasses. A smile she recognized. Malone. That night Lena locked the apartment door and slid the second flash drive into the drawer with the first. Ranger paced the room, nails clicking on the floorboards. Maya sat cross-legged on her bed, sketching without looking up. Lena studied her daughter, the curve of her shoulders, the way she kept Ranger close. If Malone was willing to put them in a sniper's line once, he'd do it again. And now she had proof that could burn his whole operation. But proof like that was a live grenade. And she was holding the pin. The first blow didn't come from Malone's SUV. It came from the school. On Monday morning, Lena walked Maya to the gates. The air smelled faintly of wet concrete, the kind that clung to your clothes. She waited until her daughter disappeared into the building before heading to Eli's corner for coffee. But halfway there, her phone buzzed a number she didn't. "No, this is Principal Henley," the voice said. "I think you'd better come down here." The front office smelled like disinfectant and old paper. Maya sat in a plastic chair, her hoodie pulled up, eyes locked on the floor. Across from her, a boy with a bloody lip smirked like he'd just won something. She attacked him. Henley said, folding her hands like she'd rehearsed this a dozen times. "Liar," Maya muttered. "Excuse me?" She didn't attack him, Lena said, stepping between them. "What happened?" The principal's eyes flicked to Maya. "He made a comment about your dog." She overreacted. Lena's gaze shifted to the boy. "What did you say?" He shrugged. "Just that my dad says dogs like hers should be put down before they hurt someone." Lena knelt beside Maya, and then? "He touched my sketchbook," Maya said, voice low. "Tried to rip the page, I pushed him." Henley sighed. "School policy, both students get suspension." "Policy's garbage," Lena said flatly. "You punish the kid defending herself the same as the one provoking her. You're teaching exactly what?" Henley's jaw tightened. "I'm just following the rules." Lena looked at her daughter, then back at Henley. So was Malone. Outside, the sky felt heavier. Maya clutched her sketchbook, Ranger brushing against her legs as they walked. The suspension would go on her record. Malone didn't even have to touch them to land the hit. He just had to let the rot run its course. That night, Lena's apartment was more crowded than usual. Eli had rolled in with Marcy trailing behind, a paper sack of canned soup swinging from her wrist. A younger man Lena had seen once or twice, face hidden under a knit cap, followed them in. "Name's Reggie," he said. "Worked in city sanitation until Malone's boys decided I was dumping illegally, lost my job. Figured you could use more friends." Lena poured coffee for everyone, the tiny kitchen filling with the smell. It felt almost normal, except for the way everyone kept their backs to the wall and their voices low. They talked about patterns, street vendors hit with surprise inspections, veterans evicted on code violations, people pulled into voluntary safety programs and ending up in mugshots for things they didn't do. "They're clearing the map," Eli said. "One block at a time, and the news? They'll never show the faces." By midnight, Lena was at the kitchen table again. 2 flash drives in front of her, her phone face down. Ranger lying at her feet, ears flicking at every noise from the street below. The faces around that table tonight were more than just stories. They were targets. And if she was going to move against Malone, she couldn't do it alone. But bringing more people in meant putting them in the line of fire. She glanced at the bedroom door, where Maya slept with her sketchbook still in her arms. Some choices didn't have safe options. The plan wasn't much of a plan. Just a table on the sidewalk in front of Lucky Wash, a stack of printed photos from the park, and a handwritten sign. "We were there. This is what happened." Ailey sat in his chair at one end, Marcy at the other. Reggie manned the stack of flyers. Lena stood behind them, Ranger at her side. Maya perched on the laundromat steps sketching the scene. They weren't shouting, weren't blocking traffic, just letting people come to them. At first, it worked. Passersby slowed, looked at the photos, took flyers. A few muttered I knew something was off before moving on. One older man clapped Lena on the shoulder and whispered, "Don't stop." But by noon, a patrol car rolled up. Not Malone. 2 uniforms Lena didn't know. "Got a permit for this?" one asked. "It's public sidewalk," Lena replied. "You're distributing materials. That's an organized event." "Needs a permit," Eli chuckled. "Guess the First Amendment's got a filing fee now." The younger cop's jaw tightened. "You'll need to pack it up." Lena kept her voice level. "We're not blocking anyone. We're not selling anything. We're citizens talking to citizens." The older cop's eyes flicked to Ranger. "And that dog, you got his license?" Ranger's ears twitched. Lena's hands curled into fists. "He's licensed, vaccinated, and retired with honors. You want the paperwork? Come inside and I'll show you." They didn't follow her inside. They didn't have to. 15 minutes later, a city truck pulled up and slapped a temporary closure notice on Lucky Wash's front door. By the time the crowd cleared, the flyers were scattered down the block, trampled into the gutter. Maya sat with her sketchbook closed, staring at the yellow notice like it was a death certificate. "They didn't even talk about the park," she said. "They just shut us down." "That's the point," Marcy said. "Doesn't matter if they win the argument if they can end the conversation." That night, Lena got another message, no words, just a picture, her apartment door. Taken from the hallway. She didn't show it to Maya. She just locked every deadbolt, pushed the table against the door, and sat up with Ranger at her feet. Through the thin walls, she could hear the hum of the dryers downstairs and the occasional cough of someone on the street. The city had its usual night sounds, but tonight they felt like something else, a warning that the walls weren't as solid as she wanted to believe. Ranger's head lifted once, ears pricked before settling again. But Lena stayed awake until the sky went pale. It happened just after sunrise. Lena had dozed off in the armchair. Ranger curled at her feet when the pounding started. 3 hard knocks, then a pause, then 3 more too precise to be random. She moved to the door, careful not to make a sound, peering through the peephole. No one, just an envelope taped to the frame. She pulled it inside. The paper was thick, the handwriting neat. You have until Friday to hand over both drives. If you don't, the next shot won't miss. No signature. No contact number. But there was a single photo folded inside the front steps of Maya's school. By the time Maya woke, Lena had the coffee going and the letter burned in the sink. She kept her voice steady as she told her daughter she'd be walking her to school. Every day from now on. At the gates, Lena scanned the street. Parents chatted in small knots. Kids ran ahead. Everything looked normal. That was the worst part. On the walk back, she cut through the alley behind Lucky Wash. That's where she saw it, a figure crouched by the back door, fiddling with the lock. Hey! The man bolted, darting between 2 dumpsters. Ranger lunged forward, leash straining. Lena rounded the corner just in time to see the back of a black jacket vanish into a waiting car. She didn't catch the plate. That afternoon, Eli showed up with news. Marcy's gone, he said. Cart's still there, but she's not. Nobody's seen her since yesterday. Lena felt the ground tilt. You think? I think Malone's cleaning house. The words hung between them. That night, Lena set the 2 drives on the table. She stared at them until the room felt too small, the air too heavy. Ranger sat beside her chair, head tilted, eyes steady. You were right, she said to the dog. We can't wait for this to come to us. She picked up her phone and scrolled to Victoria Hale's number. Her finger hovered over the call button. If she made this call, there was no going back. Then she thought of the letter, the photo, the empty space where Marcy should have been. She hit call. Victoria picked up on the second ring. You've decided, she said, not a question. I'm in, Lena replied. But we do it my way. No deals I can't walk away from. No names unless I need them. A pause. Then, agreed. Meet me at the old train depot, midnight. The depot sat on the edge of the city like a forgotten tooth, rust eating through its steel ribs. Freight cars sat idle on the far tracks, graffiti layered over graffiti. The air smelled of oil and rain. Victoria's SUV was parked under a dead floodlight. She stepped out in dark jeans and a weatherproof jacket, a far cry from her polished calf look. Inside the depot's main hall, a single folding table stood in the center. 2 chairs, a laptop already open. Victoria gestured for Lena to sit. Everything you've got, drives, dates, names, goes here. My people will start cross-referencing with what we've gathered. You trust your people? I trust them to hate Malone more than they hate me. They worked in near silence, the clack of keys echoing off the empty walls. The 2 drives disgorged their contents, grainy videos, clipped audio files, internal memos stamped confidential. One memo caught Lena's eye. A spreadsheet labeled Urban Renewal Phase 4. It listed street names. She knew her own block among them, alongside columns marked Target, Action, Outcome. Next to her street, the action cell read, Demonstration with Community Asset. Community Asset. Lena repeated, her voice flat. That's me, and my kid. Victoria's jaw tightened. Phase 4 means they're almost done. When a phase closes, people don't just move, they disappear. A sound broke the stillness, a low growl. Ranger stood at the far end of the hall, ears forward, eyes fixed on the shadows near the loading dock. Lena's hand went to her sidearm by reflex. We're not alone. A figure stepped into the spill of light. Reggie. He raised both hands. Easy, Eli sent me. Said you might need backup. Victoria glanced at Lena, and Lena nodded. Reggie joined them at the table, scanning the files with a frown. This isn't just your block, he said. This is half the city. By the time they left, it was past 2 a.m. Victoria locked the drives in a fireproof case. We'll leak the first piece tomorrow. Just enough to make them sweat. Outside, the rain had started again, tapping against the metal roof. Lena looked at Ranger, then at the distant glow of the city. You ready for this? Victoria asked Lena. Didn't answer. She was already walking toward the truck. Sang-Ham Sao, Eli and Marcy's cart, minus Marcy, were waiting outside Lucky Wash. Eli had a thermos in his lap. You're making moves, he said. Yeah, Lena replied. And they're going to hit back. Good, Eli said, his eyes steady. Means you're aiming in the right direction. The leak went live at 7:04 a.m. A popular independent news blog posted a 2-minute, video grainy footage from the Ma Park, audio of Malone saying, "Keep the kid walking point," and the spreadsheet screenshot showing urban renewal phase 4. By 8 o'clock, the hashtags had started. Hashtag urban renewal, hashtag baited in the park, hashtag not a simulation. Some comments were furious, others skeptical, but the story was moving. By noon, a major cable channel ran a 30-second segment. They blurred Maya's face, but not Ranger's, and that scar was unmistakable. Lena was at Lucky Wash when the first patrol car rolled up. 2 uniforms, stiff smiles. Sergeant Carter. One said, "We've got a warrant to inspect your residence for unlicensed media equipment." "That's not a thing," Lena replied. "It is today." Eli wheeled himself to the doorway. "You boys want to come in here, you're going to have to arrest all of us." The officers hesitated. This block had always been easy pickings, isolated, scattered voices. Now they were facing a wall. "Suit yourselves," the lead officer muttered, heading back to the car. By mid-afternoon, the counterattack had begun. A slick press release from the police department painted Malone as a hero, claimed the footage was selectively edited by anti-police activists, and hinted that Lena had a personal grudge due to disciplinary issues during her service. Victoria called that evening. "They're trying to kill your credibility. We knew this was coming." "Let them," Lena said. "I'm not the only one with a story." The next day, Reggie came in with a box of old paper files. "Sanitation records," he said. "They cooked these to justify clearing certain streets. Same streets on your spreadsheet." Victoria's team began cross-referencing. Every file tied back to Malone's unit, sometimes directly, sometimes through shell companies. It was enough to make a bigger move. But every step forward was like turning up the volume on a storm siren. They could all feel something closing in. That night, Lena was locking up when she saw a shadow at the far end of the street. Ranger tensed, low growl vibrating through his chest. The figure didn't move. Just stood there, watching. When a passing car's headlights swept the sidewalk, the figure was gone. The next strike wasn't subtle. Victoria's team stitched together a full dossier, video from the park, audio from whistleblowers, property seizure records, eviction notices, all laid out in a clean, brutal timeline. They sent it to 3 news outlets at once, with a single headline: Urban Renewal, the plan to erase a city block at a time. By noon, it was everywhere. Anchor desks filled the screen with maps shaded in red, showing the neighborhoods marked for renewal. There were interviews with residents who'd been pushed out, veterans whose benefits had vanished after code violations, shop owners who'd been buried in surprise fines, and then they rolled Ranger's footage, him leaping between Maya and the bullet. They called it heroic. They called it shocking. But they also showed Mallon's voice giving the order. The blowback hit fast. By late afternoon, the mayor's office announced an internal review. The department suspended 2 officers, neither of them Malone. He was still out there, still wearing the badge. That night, Lena walked Maya home from a friend's house. They were halfway down the block when a black sedan slid out from a side street, headlights flaring. The passenger window rolled down. A man leaned out, hood up, face shadowed. "Nice dog," he said, voice carrying just enough malice to make Lena's chest go tight. "Shame if something happened to the girl walking him." The sedan rolled past slow, tires whispering on wet pavement. Maya's hand found Lena's without looking. Ranger was rigid at the end of his leash, muscles quivering. At home, Lena checked. Every lock twice, then called Victoria. They're escalating, she said. They're rattled, Victoria corrected. It means the story's hurting them. But it also means they'll aim for your softest spot. They already have, Lena said. Glancing at Maya's closed bedroom door. Eli came by the next morning with a fresh bruise on his cheekbone. 2. Uniforms. Didn't say a word, just let me know they could. Reggie was right behind him, holding up a cracked phone. They're spreading Photoshop crap about Maya online, making it look like she's carrying a knife at the park. I can trace the accounts, but it's coming from inside the department. Lena's hands clenched so hard her nails bit her palms. That's not just to smear her, Eli said. That's to make someone think they're justified if they go after her. The room went still. That night, Lena sat at the kitchen table with Victoria on speakerphone. Eli and Reggie leaning over the spreadsheet printouts, Ranger's head heavy in her lap. They want a war? Lena said. Fine, but we're going to choose the ground we fight on. Victoria's voice was cold steel. Then we make it public. No filters, no edits, everything. Lena looked at the flash drives. Then we burn. The mask off, once and for all. They chose Saturday for the strike. The laundromat's parking lot became their staging ground. By sunrise, folding tables were lined with laptops, a projector, portable speakers. A makeshift screen, a white bedsheet, clipped to 2 poles, would show everything. Word had spread through the block like a current. Vendors set up food stalls. Kids chalked slogans on the asphalt. We belong here, and tell the truth. Even the pastor from the corner church came, folding his arms across his chest as if daring someone to make him leave. Lena stood near the front, Ranger at her side, scanning faces. Maya was with Eli, handing out water bottles. Reggie was hunched over a laptop, double-checking the files. At noon, Victoria stepped up to the mic. We're here today because our city belongs to all of us, not just the people who can afford to buy it twice. The projector lit up. The first slide, the spreadsheet. Urban Renewal Phase 4. Gasps rippled through the crowd as they recognized street names. The next slides were photos, families evicted, shops shuttered, veterans' housing condemned. Then came the park footage, raw and uncut. The crowd shifted from murmurs to low, angry shouts. That's when the first patrol car rolled up. Then another. Malone got out of the third. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. This gathering is unauthorized, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. You're obstructing the public lot. Victoria raised an eyebrow. This is private property. Owner's right there. She pointed to Mrs. Alvarez, who ran Lucky Wash and was standing with arms folded like stone. Malone's eyes flipped over the crowd, landing on Maya. You want to play activist, Sergeant? Fine, but you keep your kid out of it. She's already in it, Lena shot back. Because you put her there. Reggie clicked to the next video, an audio recording of Malone's voice from a different operation, ordering visual deterrence for undesirable zones. The crowd's energy shifted, fear folding into anger, anger into something harder. People moved closer together, a wall of bodies between Malone and the projector. Malone's jaw tightened. Pack it up, Carter. Last warning. Lena stepped forward. Or what? You'll write me up? Arrest me in front of all these cameras? For the first time, she saw a flicker in his eyes. Calculation. He stepped back, muttering something to the officer beside him. The patrol cars pulled away, slow, like they wanted everyone to see they weren't running. When the last video played, there was no applause, just a heavy, charged silence. People looked at each other with the kind of recognition that doesn't fade. Victoria leaned close. You just painted a target the size of this block on your back. Lena glanced at Maya, who was kneeling to hug Ranger, her face pressed into his fur. Good, she said. Means they'll stop aiming at the shadows. The knock came at 2:13 a.m., not the steady, polite rhythm of a neighbor. This was fists on wood, 3 quick hits, a pause, then 3 more fast enough to rattle the door in its frame. Ranger was on his feet before Lena was, hackles raised, teeth bared. "Stay in the bedroom with Maya," Lena whispered to Eli, who was sleeping on the couch. She moved toward the door, bare feet silent on the floorboards. The knock came again, harder this time. Then a voice. "Police, open up." Lena glanced through the peephole, 3 uniforms, no badges visible. One had a flashlight angled just right to blind the viewer. She didn't open the door. "Badge numbers," she called. Silence. Then the flashlight clicked off. A low voice said something she couldn't catch, and all 3 stepped out of sight. Ranger kept growling until the hallway went completely still. At dawn, she found out why they'd come. Her phone buzzed with a message from Reggie. "They hit my place. Took the drives I had. Arrested Marcy's nephew on resisting charges." Half an hour later, Victoria called. "They came for my office too. Files gone. They're moving to strip us before the review committee even meets." Lena looked at the drawer where her copy of the drive sat under a layer of socks. "They didn't get everything." "Then you've got the last clean set," Victoria said. "Guard it like your life depends on it." Because it does. That evening, 2 patrol cars parked across from Lucky Wash and just sat there, engines running. Kids who usually played in the lot disappeared inside. The corner store closed early. Eli rolled up to Lena, voice low. "They're trying to freeze us out. Make the neighbors scared to be seen with us." "They already are," Lena said. At 11:47 p.m., a loud crash shook the apartment. The back window smashed. Ranger bolted toward the noise, barking hard. By the time Lena reached the kitchen, the figure was gone, the fire escape rattling from retreating footsteps. On the floor lay a single Polaroid. Maya, walking to school, Ranger beside her. Shot from behind. Lena stood in the doorway to Maya's room for a long time, watching her sleep. She could still hear Malone's voice at the lot. "Keep your kid out of it." She knew now there was no out of it. There was only in. Deeper, until one side couldn't move anymore. By morning, Lena had stopped thinking like someone on the defensive. The fear was still there, cold and sharp, but it had shifted into something else. Something she recognized from the field. She called Victoria first. "I'm done waiting for them to make the next move. We're going to bait him." "You realize the irony," Victoria said dryly. "Yeah," Lena replied. "Difference is, my bait knows it's bait, and my target's predictable." The plan was simple on paper. Lena would stage a drop in the alley behind Lucky Wash. 2 boxes. One empty, one filled with decoy files, just enough to look like the last copies of the urban renewal data. Reggie would tip an anonymous friendly in the department about the drop. Malone's habit was to handle sensitive pickups himself, less risk of leaks. Victoria's team would be hidden in the apartments overlooking the alley. Cameras ready. Eli would be in position at street level with his phone streaming live to multiple accounts. If it worked, they'd catch Malone in the act of seizing evidence without a warrant. If it went wrong, Lena didn't dwell on that part. The night of the drop, the alley was a hollow mouth of shadow. The hum of the laundromat's dryers was the only sound. At 11:03 p.m., a dark SUV rolled into view, headlights off. Lena, crouched behind a stack of pallets, felt Ranger's body tense beside her. The driver's door opened. Malone stepped out, glancing down the alley before moving to the box. He popped the lid, rifled through the papers. That's when Lena stepped forward. "Looking for something, officer?" Malone froze for a fraction of a second, then straightened, smile sliding into place. "Evening, Sergeant. Thought I'd save the city some trouble and secure this. Without a warrant? Call it a community service." Above, camera shutters clicked. Across the street, Ila's voice carried through the live stream. "This is what they do." In the dark, no paper trail. Malone's eyes flicked upward, catching the glint of lenses. For the first time, Lena saw something that looked like unease. "You think this changes anything?" he said quietly. Lena took a step closer. "No. I know it does." When the SUV pulled away, the alley felt wider somehow. Reggie emerged from a doorway, grinning. "Got him clean, multiple angles." Victoria's voice crackled in Lena's earpiece. "We'll push it out in the morning. By the time they spin it, half the city will have seen it live." Lena let out a slow breath. Ranger pressed against her leg, warm and solid. It wasn't victory, not yet, but for the first time in weeks, she felt like they'd taken ground. Instead of losing it, by sunrise, the footage was everywhere. Clips of Malone in the alley, no warrant, no backup. Caught red-handed with the decoy files were bouncing from local Facebook groups to national Twitter threads. The hashtag Midnight Malone started as a joke, but turned into a rallying cry. On talk radio, callers split into two camps. Some said it was proof the department was rotten to the core. Others claimed Lena had entrapped a good cop. By midday, reporters were parked outside Lucky Wash. Ranger got more camera time than Lena, his scar catching the light every time. He lifted his head. Victoria called from her office. The review board's meeting early. They weren't planning to touch Malone until next quarter. Now they're scrambling. "That's good," Lena said. "It's dangerous, Victoria." Corrected. Cornered people lash out. She was right. That night, Lena took Ranger for a walk while Maya sketched in the laundromat office. The street was quiet. Just the hum of a vending machine and the buzz of a flickering streetlight. A van rolled past slow, windows tinted. It didn't stop, but when Lena got back, the laundromat door was ajar. "Maya?" No answer. Her heart kicked hard as she stepped inside. Ranger lunged forward, nose low, ears flat. In the office, Maya sat in the corner, arms wrapped around her knees. She was shaking. "They came in," she whispered. "Two guys. They didn't touch me, they just looked around." One of them said, "Tell your mom the clock's ticking." Then they left. Eli showed up 10 minutes later, his chair squeaking on the tile. "They're sending you a message," he said. "They already have the message," Lena replied. "Now they're just trying to make sure I heard it." She crouched in front of Maya. "You okay?" Maya nodded, but her hand stayed clenched in her lap. Lena looked at Ranger, then at Eli. "We double shifts on the door. No one's alone, ever." The next morning, Victoria's team pushed the alley footage to national media. Cable anchors were playing it on loop, debating the ethics of sting operations while Malone's face filled the screen. But Lena couldn't enjoy the momentum. She knew what came next. Malone wasn't the kind of man to let the last image of him be standing in an alley with stolen evidence. He'd make a new image, one with her in handcuffs. Or worse, it started with sirens close enough to rattle the glass in Lena's apartment windows. She was halfway through locking up Lucky Wash for the night when 3 patrol cars slid to a stop out front. Doors slammed. Boots hit pavement. Malone stepped out last, his face calm in a way that made Lena's stomach twist. "Sergeant Carter," he called, loud enough for the neighbors on their balconies to hear. "You're under arrest for possession of stolen property and obstruction of justice." Lena didn't move. "You don't have a case." Malone held up a clear evidence bag. Inside was one of the flash drives, her flash drive. Except she knew. It hadn't left the drawer in her apartment. "Found this in your trash," he said. "That's impossible." He smiled. "Search warrant says otherwise." Behind him, 2 uniforms were already heading up the stairs toward her apartment. Maya appeared in the laundromat doorway, eyes wide. "Mom, stay inside," Lena said. Voice steady. One of the neighbors yelled down from a balcony. She didn't do anything. But the cameras were already rolling from the press, from bystanders, from someone in Malone's own unit. Every lens was catching the same thing. Lena Carter, veteran, activist, standing in the glow of red and blue. Lights with a police officer reading her rights. They didn't cuff her, not yet. Malone liked to play it just slow enough for the humiliation to seep in. "You should have stayed in your lane," he murmured as he stepped close. "You should have picked a different city." Lena shot back, his jaw flexed but the smile stayed. Clock's ticking, Carter. Inside the station, they sat her in an interview room so cold it made her fingers ache. The camera in the corner blinked red dot. An officer she didn't know slid a stack of papers across the table. "Sign the consent to search your devices and we can make this go easier." Lena leaned back. "No," he shrugged. "Suit yourself. We'll get it anyway. Just means you're here longer." By the time Victoria posted bail, it was nearly dawn. "They planted it," Lena said as they stepped out into the pale light. "I know," Victoria replied. "But proving it? That's another story. Right now they've got you in headlines with the word arrest next to your name." Lena looked toward the block where Maya and Ranger were waiting. The street felt different, emptier, even with the city waking up. "They want to make me toxic," Lena said. Victoria's voice was grim. "And they're doing a good job. Which means you don't have much time to turn this around." The morning after her arrest, the block felt colder. Not the kind of cold that came from weather, but the kind that crept in when neighbors started closing their doors a little faster. Lena could feel eyes on her as she loaded the truck. Maya was quiet, clutching Ranger's leash, the dog pacing tight circles like he knew this wasn't just a trip. "You're not going to school?" Maya asked. "Not for a few days." Lena glanced at the corner, where a patrol car had been idling since dawn. "We're going somewhere Malone can't find us. Is that possible?" Lena didn't answer. She drove without music, weaving through back streets she'd memorized from years of supply runs in the army. The city peeled away into stretches of warehouses and chain-link fences, then into neighborhoods that had already been gutted by urban renewal, block after block of boarded-up windows and empty lots where houses used to stand. Finally, she turned down a gravel road that disappeared into scrub and pines. At the end sat a weather-beaten cabin, its porch sagging, chimney tilted like it was listening to the trees. Eli was already there, parked in his chair by the steps. "You think I was going to let you run without backup?" he said. "I thought. You couldn't leave the block. I can when the block's on fire." Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar and old dust. Lena dropped her bag in the corner. Maya sank onto the couch, Ranger climbing up beside her before she could stop him. "Whose place is this?" she asked. "Friend of mine," Eli said. "Owes me more than one favor. Doesn't ask questions." Lena checked the locks, then the back door, then the single small window in the bedroom. Her muscles didn't unclench until she'd walked the perimeter twice. "You going to tell me the plan?" Eli asked. "Still making it," Lena said. "But I know this Malone's not just going after me. He's going after everyone who can prove what he's doing. We've got one last card to play before he takes it all." After lunch, Lena stepped out onto the porch with her phone. She dialed Victoria. "We're out of sight for now," she said. "But we can't stay here long." "You still have the original drives?" "Both." "Good, because I have something that can make them impossible to bury. Once it's out for good." "What's the catch?" "You have to get it to the station." "The police station?" "Not just any station. The State Investigative Bureau's local office. They have a safe drop system that bypasses Malone's chain of command." Lena looked toward the tree line, imagining the patrol cars already fanning out in the city. "That's not a small walk." Victoria's voice sharpened. "It's the last one you'll need to take." That night, the forest around the cabin was so quiet it made her ears ring. Maya had fallen asleep against Ranger, the dog steady, breathing a counterpoint to her own restless mind. Lena sat at the kitchen table with the drives laid out in front of her. They were small, unremarkable, just metal and plastic, but they carried every ugly thread she'd pulled from Malone's web. She thought about the risks. The last time she'd walked into an ambush, it was on foreign soil, and she'd had a squad at her back. This time, she had Eli, a kid, and a dog with a scar. And still, she knew she was going. They left the cabin before sunrise. The air was wet and cold, the kind that slipped under your collar and stayed there. The gravel road swallowed the trucks. Tires in a low, steady crunch. Maya sat in the back with Ranger's head in her lap, the dog's eyes tracking every flicker of movement in the trees. Eli rode shotgun, a folded paper map spread across his knees. If we take 42 west, we can cut through the industrial belt and come out 2 blocks from the Bureau's building. And if Malone's watching the main roads? Lena asked. Then we'll know by the second intersection. They didn't have to wait that long dot at the first traffic light inside the city limits. A white van slid into the lane behind them. No plates on the front. Windows tinted black. Lena felt the shift in her chest before she saw it in the mirror. They've got us. Eli kept his voice low. Turn right now. She swung the truck hard, tires squealing against the wet asphalt. The van followed, keeping 2 cars back. Maya's voice came from the back seat. Is it them? Yes, Lena said. But they're not getting us today. She threaded the truck through side streets, cutting down alleys too narrow for the van, doubling back through a strip mall lot, then diving into a parking garage. They killed the engine on the 3rd level, tucked between a concrete pillar and a rusted sedan that looked abandoned. For 3 long minutes, the only sound was Ranger's breathing and the distant echo of tires somewhere below. When they finally rolled back out, the van was gone. By mid-morning, they were less than a mile from the Bureau's building. That's when they hit the roadblock. 2 patrol cars, lights flashing, angled to block both lanes. An officer stepped forward, hand raised. Road's closed, he said. Gas leak up ahead. You'll need to turn back. Lena's eyes flicked to the shoulder. No fire trucks, no utility vans. Just the 2 cars and 3 uniforms she didn't recognize. Which way to detour? She asked. The officer shrugged. Back the way you came. Ayla muttered under his breath, This is Malone's. Lena put the truck in reverse, easing back slowly until they were out of sight, then cut down the nearest alley. Eli tapped the map. There's a pedestrian path, 2 blocks over. Leads straight to the Bureau's side entrance. We'll have to go on foot, Lena said. They parked behind a shuttered hardware store, locked the truck, and set out. Lena in front, Eli rolling beside Maya, Ranger moving like a shadow at their heels. Every step toward that building felt heavier. The streets were too quiet, the air too still, like the city itself was holding its breath. When they rounded the last corner, the Bureau's brick facade came into view. 3 stories, flags snapping in the wind, glass doors reflecting the pale sky. It looked like safety, but Lena had learned long ago, the moment you start believing you're safe is the moment someone takes the shot. They were 20 yards from the Bureau steps, when the sound came low at first, then sharp enough to make Ranger's ears snap forward. A motorcycle roared into the plaza from the opposite street, black paint glinting under the weak winter sun. The rider wore no insignia, no license plate, just a mirrored visor that reflected the world in warped silver. He didn't stop. Instead, he cut the engine and coasted straight toward Lena's group, one boot dragging like an anchor on the stone tiles. Maya's grip on Ranger's leash tightened. Mom! Lena's pulse spiked. She shifted her weight, ready to shove. Maya behind her, but the rider braked just short of the steps and kicked the stand down. From inside his jacket, he pulled a small black pouch and tossed it toward her feet. It hit the ground with a metallic clink. Lena didn't move. What is this? The rider tilted his helmet. Insurance, open it. She crouched, keeping one hand near her side, and unzipped the pouch. Inside, another flash drive, not hers, but taped to it was a note in block letters. Yours is already compromised. Use this. By the time she looked up, the writer was gone. Slipped back onto the bike and out of sight in the noise of the city. Eli rolled forward, eyes narrowed. This smells like a setup. Or a lifeline, Lena said. She looked toward the bureau's doors. If she took the drive inside now, she risked handing Malone exactly what he wanted, an excuse to say she was trying to feed the investigators false evidence. But if she walked away, she might never get another shot. Behind her, Maya whispered, "Mom," Ranger's growling. Lena turned just as two men in plain clothes stepped out from behind a column. Their jackets hung just loose enough to hide the bulges at their hips. One smiled, not friendly. "Sergeant Carter?" he said, though it was clear he already knew the answer. "You need to come with us," the other added. Eli's voice was flat. "These aren't Bureau agents." "Then who are they?" Maya asked. No one answered. Lena had 3 seconds to decide. Hand over the pouch, push past them to the bureau doors, or get her kid and her dog out of there before this turned into something they couldn't walk away from. Her choice came fast, sharp as muscle memory. "Run," she said. They bolted not toward the bureau, but down the side street that ran between the federal building and the library. Ranger lunged forward, leash taut, pulling Maya like a living shield. Behind them, footsteps pounded against the stone. The pouch was still in Lena's hand. She didn't know if it was a bomb, a gift, or a trap. But right now, it was the only piece on the board Malone didn't control, and she was going to make sure it stayed that way. The side street funneled them into a narrow alley lined with dumpsters and rusted fire escapes. The air stank of old grease and rain-soaked cardboard. Lena didn't slow down. "Keep going, don't look back." But Maya glanced over her shoulder anyway. "They're still coming." The echo of boots was closing in, steady, relentless. Ranger barked, low and guttural, a sound that came from deep in his chest. At the next corner, Lena veered left, only to find a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. "Damn it." Eli wheeled up beside her. "I can give you 30 seconds. Go." Lena hesitated, but the look in Eli's eyes was steady, almost calm. She boosted Maya over the fence first, Ranger scrambling up with surprising agility for his size. Then she climbed, the cold metal rattling under her hands. On the other side, Maya grabbed Ranger's collar, pulling him toward the shadow of a loading dock. Lena dropped down beside them, just as Eli's voice echoed from the other side. "Hey, you boys lost? This is private property." There was a scuffle, boots on gravel, the sharp crack of something hitting metal before Eli's voice cut off. Lena swallowed hard. "We can't go back." They moved fast, weaving through back lots and delivery alleys until the sound of pursuit faded. Only when they reached a small park 2 blocks away did Lena stop to catch her breath. Maya was pale, but her voice was steady. "Eli's okay, right?" Lena forced herself to nod. "He's handled worse." But inside, she wasn't sure. She pulled the pouch from her pocket. It felt heavier now, as if whatever was inside had soaked up the danger of the last half hour. "Mom," Maya said, "what if that guy on the bike was trying to help us?" Lena looked at her. "Why do you think that?" "Because Ranger didn't growl at him." It was such a simple observation, but it cut straight through Lena's doubt. Ranger didn't trust easily, not after what he'd been through. If he hadn't bristled at the biker, maybe there was a reason. She crouched to scratch the dog behind the ears. "Can you find him again, boy?" Ranger's ears pricked. Somewhere in the distance, faint over the hum of the city, came the sound of a motorcycle engine revving twice, then cutting off. Lena stood. "Let's go." The sound of the motorcycle was faint, like a thread woven into the city's noise, but Ranger pulled toward it with purpose. They crossed 2 side streets, slipped between a laundromat and a pawn shop, and emerged into a half-abandoned Lot littered with broken glass and weeds pushing through the asphalt. The bike was there, leaned against a cinder block wall tagged with layers of graffiti. No rider in sight. Lena raised a hand, signaling Maya to stay back. Ranger, with her. She stepped forward alone, scanning the shadows. You're fast, a voice said from above. She looked up. The rider was on the roof of the one-story building. Helmet still on, watching her. You left something with me, Lena said. I gave you a chance, he replied. Most people would have taken it. Most people don't have a kid and a dog to protect. The rider crouched, then dropped to the ground with practiced ease. Up close, Lena could see that the visor was cracked at one corner, revealing a sliver of brown skin and a scar that traced from temple to jaw. You think Malone sent me, he said. I don't think anything yet. But if you're not with him, prove it. He reached into his jacket slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a laminated ID card. Not a badge, not police. It read, Office of Internal Affairs, Confidential Consultant. Lena didn't move to take it. This could be fake. It could, he admitted. But I'm the only reason you're not in a van right now. Maya stepped forward, Ranger at her side. Why are you helping us? The rider looked at her for a long moment before answering. Because I know what it's like to be used as bait. Lena's chest tightened. I was 12, he continued. They called it a sting operation. They never told my family. I walked away with a bullet in my shoulder and a funeral for a kid I grew up with. He paused, the memory settling over his voice. Malone was in charge of that unit. Lena finally took the pouch from her pocket and held it up. What's on this? Everything you already have, he said. And one thing you don't, the names of the people above Malone. You take that to the bureau. They can't bury it without burning themselves. She studied him. And what's your price? Nothing. Just finish it. Because if you don't, he'll keep doing it to other kids, other families, other dogs. His gaze flicked to Ranger, then back to her. Somewhere behind them, sirens began to rise low, then swelling. The rider's voice was urgent now. They found your truck. You have maybe 5 minutes. Lena glanced at Maya, at Ranger, then at the drive in her hand. She didn't fully trust him, but she didn't have the luxury of trust anymore. She slid the pouch inside her jacket. Then, we'd better move. The sirens were getting louder, too loud. They weren't coming from one direction. They were closing in from 3. The rider swung onto his motorcycle. Follow me, stay close. If you lose me, keep heading east until you hit the river. Lena grabbed Maya's hand. Let's go. They moved fast, cutting through the lot, down an alley where the air reeked of diesel and hot tar. Ranger stayed ahead, muscles taut, leash straining like a live wire. The rider's taillight glowed red ahead of them, weaving between dumpsters and parked delivery vans. He knew the city's veins, the shortcuts, the blind spots, the cracks Malone's net couldn't reach. But the net was tightening. 2 blocks from the bureau, a police cruiser slid into their path, lights flaring, tires screaming. The driver's door flew open and a man stepped out, slow and deliberate. Malone that he didn't need a badge in his hand. His smirk was enough. You've been busy, Carter, he called. Almost made it too. Lena's eyes swept the street. No cover, no easy escape. The rider revved his engine, but Malone's men were already flanking from both sides. Boots pounding on concrete. Maya's grip on Lena's arm tightened. Mom! Malone's gaze flicked to the pouch inside her jacket. I'll take what you've got there. And maybe the mutt, too. He owes me a scar. Ranger's growl rumbled like distant thunder. The rider leaned toward Lena. His voice was low, urgent. You have 2 choices. Hand me the drive and I'll get it in, or you run with the kid and the dog and disappear. Lena's mind split in 2. If she stayed with the drive, Malone would take Maya. If she ran, the evidence might never see daylight. She looked at Maya. Her daughter's eyes were wide, but steady, trusting her completely. too completely. Time fractured into heartbeats. 1. She pulled the pouch from her jacket. 2. She shoved it into the rider's gloved hand. 3. She turned, grabbed Maya and Ranger, and sprinted down the narrow gap between buildings, ignoring Malone's shout. Gunfire cracked behind them, short bursts, ricochets sparking off brick. The rider's engine roared, drowning it out, pulling the chaos toward himself like a magnet. Lena didn't look back. Every step was away from the evidence, away from the bureau, but toward the only thing she could not lose. They burst out into a back street lined with shuttered shops. No sirens here, no boots pounding. Just the sound of Ranger's breathing and the hollow thud of Lena's pulse in her ears. Maya's voice was barely above a whisper. "Do you think he'll make it?" Lena swallowed hard. "He has to." Lena pushed through the warped door of an abandoned laundromat. The place smelled of damp plaster and rusted metal. Dust motes hung in the gray light from the high windows. She checked the street one last time before locking the bolt from the inside. Only then did she let Maya sink onto an overturned laundry basket, Ranger curling at her feet like a sentinel. "Stay quiet," Lena said. "We don't know who's listening." Across town, the rider was nothing but a flicker between lanes, slipping through traffic, diving into underpasses, hugging curves like a man who didn't believe in brakes. The pouch thumped against his ribs inside the jacket. He knew what it carried. Knew, too, what Malone would do to erase it. He aimed for the service entrance of the bureau, where deliveries came in under minimal watch. But as he rounded the final corner, a black SUV rolled up onto the curb, blocking the ramp. Malone's men stepped out, 3 of them, plain clothes, but their stances were pure tactical. The rider didn't slow. He dropped into a low skid, sparks trailing, and slid between the SUV's bumper and a parked sedan. One of the men grabbed for him, fingers scraping the leather of his jacket. Too late. The bike shot forward, tires squealing, and disappeared into the shadow of the delivery. Back in the laundromat, Maya's whisper broke the silence. "Mom, what if he doesn't get there?" Lena was cleaning a shallow cut on Ranger's ear. She didn't look up. "Then we find another way, but you gave him everything." Lena tied off the bandage with steady fingers. "Not everything," she said, and patted her pocket. Inside was the original drive, the one she thought was compromised. The rider found the service elevator empty. He rolled the bike in, hit the button for sublevel 2, and counted the seconds by heartbeats. When the doors slid open, he was face to face with a man in a bureau windbreaker and the barrel of a gun. "Going somewhere?" the agent asked. The rider glanced past him. The corridor was empty, quiet as a morgue. "Yeah," he said, "upstairs." Lena's phone buzzed a single short vibration. No caller ID, no text, just the signal she'd agreed on with the rider hours ago. In case something went wrong, her pulse sank. "They've got him," she murmured. Ranger lifted his head, ears sharp. Maya reached for her mother's hand. "What do we do now?" Lena looked at the grimy windows, the street beyond, the sky turning the color of bruised steel. "We stop hiding." Lena stepped out of the laundromat into the raw evening air. The city felt tighter now, like every street had a trap waiting. But she'd lived in tighter corners before. She led Maya and Ranger down the block, head low, moving like a shadow between pools of lamplight. "Where are we going?" Maya asked, to get him back. The bureau's back entrance loomed ahead after 10 minutes of side streets and alleyways. Security cameras blinked red along the roofline. Lena didn't bother avoiding them. If Malone was watching, she wanted him to know she was coming. She stopped 2 buildings away and crouched beside Maya. "I need you to stay here with Ranger. No matter what happens, don't move until I come back." Maya's eyes went wide. "Mom," Lena put a hand on her cheek. "You trust me?" A nod. A whisper. "Yes." Inside, the writer was cuffed to a chair under a buzzing fluorescent light. Malone stood in the corner, jacket off, sleeves rolled, eyes like stone. "You've caused me a lot of work," he said. "And for what?" "To give that washed up soldier one last shot at playing hero." The writer's voice was flat. "She's better at it than you'll ever be." Malone's jaw flexed. He stepped forward, picked up the pouch from the table, and unzipped it. "I'll find every copy you made. And when I do, no one will remember you existed." The door banged open. Lena stepped inside, unarmed but moving like she owned the room. "Looking for me?" she asked. Malone's expression flickered, just for a second, before settling into that smug mask again. "You're saving me the trouble. Nice." She took another step. "Let him go, Malone. Or I swear." "You swear what?" He laughed. "You've got nothing. That's where you're wrong." From her pocket, Lena pulled the drive she'd kept hidden. She tossed it onto the table. It slid to a stop just short of Malone's hand. "You destroy me, this goes public. Not just you, everyone you work for. Every name, every bank transfer, every dead kid you used as bait." Malone's hand hovered over it. His men shifted uneasily. "You're bluffing," he said. Lena smiled. "Try me." Silence stretched, taut and dangerous. Then, behind Malone, the writer shifted his weight, just enough for the chair leg to catch on the floor and tip. The noise snapped Malone's focus for half a second. It was all Lena needed. She drove her shoulder into him, sending them both crashing into the table. The drive skittered to the floor. In the chaos, the writer kicked out, catching one of Malone's men in the knee. The man went down hard. Lena grabbed the pouch, yanked the writer's cuffs free with the key hanging from Malone's belt, and pulled him toward the door. Gunfire erupted behind them, wild, uncoordinated. A round shattered the light overhead, raining glass. They didn't stop running until the night swallowed them. They tore through the back corridors of the bureau like hunted animals, their footsteps echoing in the dark. The writer was half a step ahead, Lena right behind, clutching the pouch like it was the last fragment of the world worth saving. When they burst out into the night air, Ranger was there, hackles up, leash taut in Maya's hands. The girl's face cracked into relief the moment she saw them. "You're okay," she breathed. "Not for long," the writer said. "We've got to move." They darted through a parking lot, past rows of empty cars, until they reached an old fire escape. The writer led them up 3 stories to a roof that looked out over the city's bruised skyline. Here, the noise of pursuit faded into the general hum of traffic. For the first time in hours, there was no one in sight. Lena let herself breathe. Just once, the writer crouched, scanning the streets below. "We can't stay together. Malone's going to lock the city down. You take the kid and the dog, head west. There's a safe house near the freight yard. What about you?" Lena asked. "I'll draw him off." Maya shook her head fiercely. "No, we stick together." Lena wanted to agree, but she saw it. In the writer's eyes, he wasn't asking for permission. He was buying them time. Before she could answer, Ranger's ears pricked. A faint buzzing filled the air, high, mechanical, getting louder. The writer swore under his breath. "Drone." They all turned toward the sky just as the dark shape swept over the roofline, a red light blinking beneath it. It hovered for 3 seconds, long enough to capture every face. Then it zipped away into the night. Lena's stomach dropped. Malone didn't need to chase them anymore. Now he had their faces, their positions, and if she knew him, plans already in motion. The writer's voice was grim. "He's not done. That was just his opening move." Lena tightened her grip on Maya's hand. "Then we'd better be ready for the next one." They disappeared into the shadows again, 3 figures and a dog, swallowed by a city that had just turned into a chessboard. The next morning's sky was the color of ash, clouds hanging so low they seemed to press down on the buildings. The city still buzzed, still hurried along, but to Lena the sound was different now, like static hiding something darker. A storm was building, unspoken but palpable. She sat in a rusted tin-roof cafe that barely held 4 tables. Maya was scribbling in a worn notebook, Ranger curled at her feet, eyes tracking every customer who stepped in. Eli the writer stood by the corner, his gaze locked on the door. No one said a word about the night before, but the air was thick. With the kind of tension you didn't need to name, Lena took a sip of bitter coffee, forcing it past the knot in her throat. She knew Malone wouldn't come at them with guns in broad daylight. He was smarter than that. And as if on cue, the dusty TV in the corner flickered to life with a breaking news banner. The city police have just released surveillance images showing 3 suspects and a dog allegedly involved in last night's violent attack on a government facility. The rooftop image appeared grainy, but clear enough. Lena felt as if someone had wrapped a cold hand around her heart. Sources say the group may be carrying dangerous materials. Police urge citizens not to approach and to report any sightings immediately. Eli's jaw clenched. That's Malone's play. He's made us public enemies. Now anyone on the street can turn us in. Maya looked up, her voice small and shaky. So we can't go home? Lena glanced at her daughter, then at Ranger. No, we can't go home, and from now on, it's not just Malone. It's the whole city. It took less than an hour too. See the effects. The sideways glances, the subtle steps back when Lena entered a corner store. A newspaper vendor muttering trash as they passed. On social media, the story burned through feeds like wild. Lena read each line and felt herself sinking deeper into the mud. All the stereotypes she'd seen in fragments over the years now piled onto her. The poor are violent. Veterans are unstable. Brown kids are trouble. Service dogs are dangerous. Malone wasn't just hunting them. He'd turned them into symbols for every prejudice the public wanted to believe. The days became a blur of constant movement, sleeping in abandoned warehouses, then in the basement apartment of one of Eli's old friends, stay too long, and rumors leaked out. Neighbors whispered, stares sharpened, and eventually, someone called the police. Maya stopped asking questions, but Lena knew she still heard the murmurs. Once, when they stopped at a church for food, an old woman stepped back, whispering just loud enough for Maya to hear, "Lord, look at her. She snatched my purse before I know it." Maya didn't cry. She just gripped Ranger's leash tighter. That silence hurt more than any tears could. Eli slid a local paper across the table one morning, tapping page 3. City Council holds emergency session on attack. Malone sat in the front row, speaking on the threat to community safety and the need to protect the city from extremist elements. The article quoted him, "We cannot allow these outlaws to exploit our freedoms to tear us apart. This is the time to stand together." Lena shoved the paper away. He's turning this into his own campaign. If no one stops him, he's going higher. Eli nodded. And the higher he goes, the harder he is to reach. One night, they holed up in an abandoned library. Streetlight poured through the shattered windows, streaking across dusty floors. Maya slept curled beside Ranger, while Lena and Eli sat a few feet away. "You said you used to be..." "What?" Lena asked. Eli gave a humorless chuckle. "An idiot who thought justice was black and white. I was a cop, until I saw the inside." He paused, meeting her eyes. "I've seen Malone do this before. Twist the truth, destroy reputations, let people rot under the weight of public contempt. What do you think he wants this time? Not just the evidence. He wants to prove he can crush anyone who crosses him, and he wants to do it publicly." When Eli finally dozed off, Lena sat beside Maya and Ranger. She stroked the dog's head, her fingers brushing the scar on his neck, a mark from the night Malone had used him as bait. She thought about the days before everything fell apart, when life was poor but still had pockets of peace. And about how quickly society turned its back on people like her, like Eli, like Maya, without ever bothering to learn the truth. But in the dark, When Maya's small hand found hers in sleep, Lena felt a flicker. Not the soft light of hope, but the sharper edge of resolve. Malone wanted her to break in public. She would show the public another story instead. The next morning, Lena told Eli, "We can't just run. We have to fight back, but not his way." Eli frowned, meaning what? We get the truth out. Not through his system, not through his bought and paid for media. Straight to the people he can't control. Eli leaned against the wall, thinking, that's a dangerous game. We're already in his game, Lena said. At least this time, we move a few pieces of our own. They chose a starting point no one would expect, a soup kitchen on the city's east side, a place where Lena had once stood in line with Maya when rent money had run out. Now she was here not for food, but for voices. Eli moved quietly between tables, talking to veterans who knew what corruption looked like, mothers who had lost sons to police mistakes, and men who'd been sleeping under bridges since Malone's last cleanup campaign. Lena didn't have to say Malone's name. They all knew who she meant. They recorded stories on an old phone, each face blurred, each voice altered. It wasn't just about clearing her name anymore. It was about showing the city who the real threat was. That night, in the abandoned library, Eli spliced the clips together. The footage was raw, imperfect, but it carried a weight no polished press conference ever could. Lena watched the screen as one man's skin weathered. Beard flecked with gray looked straight into the camera and said, "They call people like me trash. But I served this country. I came back, couldn't get a job, and now I'm invisible unless they need a scapegoat. Malone made me one more time. I won't be quiet again." Lena felt something burn in her chest. By dawn, the video was live posted. Through accounts Eli had set up weeks earlier. They watched in silence as the view count climbed. Comments began to pour in. "This can't be true. If it is, we've all been fooled. I remember that guy, he's not lying." It was the first crack in Malone's wall. But Malone wasn't the type to patch cracks. He demolished walls. By mid-morning, every local news channel was carrying the same exclusive report. A leaked criminal record for Lena, an edited clip showing Eli in a violent arrest, and worst of all a short, carefully chosen frame that made Maya look like she was handling a weapon. The anchor's voice was grave. "These individuals are not what they claim." Authorities urged citizens to remain vigilant. Lena's hands shook. He doctored it. Eli slammed his fist on the table. "He flipped it on us in less than 12 hours. From the corner, Maya's voice was barely above a whisper. "People will hate us even more now." Lena crouched in front of her, holding her gaze. "They'll hate what they've been told to hate. But we'll give them something else to see. Something real." That night, as they moved to yet another safe spot, Lena spotted the first flyer stapled to a telephone pole. Reward $50,000 for information leading to their capture. Beside it, someone had scribbled in black marker, "Don't believe their lies." It was small, easy to miss. But it was enough to remind her not everyone had chosen Malone's side. And that meant the game wasn't over. The rain had been falling for hours. A steady gray curtain that blurred the city lights into smears of gold and red. Lena pulled her coat tighter around Maya as they moved down an alley that smelled of wet cardboard and rust. Ranger padded silently beside them, ears twitching at every echo. Eli walked ahead, his hood up, shoulders tense. He had said only one name all morning, Riley Grant. Lena knew the name. Anyone who'd picked up a newspaper in the last 10 years knew it. Riley had been the city's loudest investigative journalist until her stories about police misconduct had mysteriously dried up. They stopped in front of a dimly lit diner. Inside, a lone woman sat in a corner booth, her back to the wall, fingers wrapped around a chipped coffee mug. She didn't look up when the bell over the door jingled, but Lena saw the flicker of recognition in her eyes when Eli slid into the seat across from her. "Eli Shaw," she said, her voice low. Last I heard, you were 2 states away and out of the game. Eli leaned forward. Last I heard, you were still in it. Rayleigh gave a bitter smile. Depends on what you call in. These days, they only let me write about charity galas and city parades. She glanced past him at Lena and Maya. And I'm guessing you're not here for my thoughts on ribbon cuttings. Eli didn't waste time. Malone's building a case in the court of public opinion. We need to tear it down before it locks in. I've got footage reel stories from the people he's buried. But if I put it out there, it dies in a day. You can make it live. Riley's gaze lingered on Maya, then on Ranger. Her eyes softened, but only for a moment. You realize that if I touch this, my career's dead. And Malone doesn't just end careers, he ends lives. Lena finally spoke. He's already trying to ours. The words hung between them. Outside, a bus hissed to a stop, its windows fogged with strangers' faces. Rayleigh looked like she was weighing something heavy, something personal. Finally, she slid her mug aside. You've got one shot, one story. If it's as real as you say, I'll get it out. But once it's out, you can't take it back. They left the diner with a meeting set for the next night. As they stepped into the rain, Eli glanced at Lena. That's the closest thing to a break we've had in weeks. Lena didn't answer right away. She was thinking about Riley's eyes, how they had hardened again the second she agreed. Trust wasn't given here. It was rented, and the rent was due in proof. That night, in a leaky room above a shuttered pawn shop, Lena sat on the floor with Maya, drying Ranger's fur with an old towel. You doing okay? She asked softly. Maya nodded, then hesitated. Do you think Ms. Riley's nice? Lena thought about it. I think she's brave, and brave matters more than nice right now. In the corner, Eli was loading a fresh battery into the camera. Tomorrow, he said without looking up. We stop running. Riley didn't show up the next night at the diner. Instead, a note was slipped under the pawn shop's door sometime before dawn. Change of plans. Too many eyes on me. Meet at the old freight yard midnight. Come alone. Bring the files. Ela read it twice, jaw tight. She spooked. That means she's finding something. Lena didn't like the idea of splitting up, but Eli was already packing the drive. Ranger paced near the window, ears pricked. You're not going alone, Lena said finally. Eli gave her a look. If Malone's got tails on us, 2 targets are worse than 1. You stay here, keep Maya safe. If I'm not back by dawn, don't finish that sentence. Her voice was sharper than she intended, but she didn't care. The freight yard was a skeleton of its former self-rusted tracks, graffiti-scrawled boxcars, the smell of oil and damp wood. Riley stood near an old signal tower, hood up, a cigarette glowing faintly in her hand. You weren't followed? She asked. Eli shook his head. What did you find? She handed him a thin envelope. Financial records. Malone's campaign funds are tied to a private security firm. Guess who owns it? His brother-in-law. And that firm? They've been getting fat contracts for community safety initiatives, which just happen to involve evicting low-income tenants and clearing encampments. Eli's eyes narrowed. And that's how he pays for his pet projects without touching official budgets. Riley dropped the cigarette, grinding it under her heel. That's not all. I found something about the dog. Eli froze. Ranger? She nodded. There's a vet record injury report filed by an officer under Malone's unit. It says Ranger was accidentally injured during a training exercise. The date matches the night you told me Malone used him as bait. Eli's grip tightened. On the envelope, that's proof. Not enough to sink him, but enough to start bleeding him in public. When Eli returned, Lena was sitting cross-legged on the floor with Maya asleep against her side, Ranger's head in her lap. The sight hit him harder than he expected. It was a picture of what Malone wanted to destroy. He told her everything. She listened without interrupting, her eyes sharpening with each detail. So we hit him where it hurts, she said. We, Make this about more than us. About everyone he's buried. That's the plan, Eli said. Then softer, you've changed since I met you. She gave a half smile. I had to. The world doesn't make room for the old version of me anymore. 2 days later, Riley pushed the first article live. It didn't name Lena, Eli, or Maya. Instead, it told the story of a decorated veteran service dog injured in a botched police operation, and how the department quietly buried the report. The piece spread faster than anyone expected. Animal rights groups picked it up. Local news anchors, usually quick to side with the police, couldn't ignore it. Malone didn't respond immediately. He was waiting, watching. That silence was its own kind of tremor. That night, as the city's noise faded into the distance, Lena found herself standing with Eli on the roof of the pawn shop, the air sharp with the smell of rain-soaked asphalt. You think this will work? She asked. Eli looked out over the rooftops. I think it's the first thing that feels like fighting back instead of just surviving. Their eyes met. No promises, no declarations, just a shared understanding that whatever came next, they were past the point of turning back. Somewhere below, Ranger barked once, sharp and alert, as if to remind them, the war wasn't over, not even close. It started with a phone call Lena wasn't supposed to hear. Eli was in the corner, voice low, but the words slipped through the thin walls of the pawn shop's upstairs room. How bad? He asked. A pause. No, don't move. I'll handle it. When he came back in, his face was tight. That was Riley. Someone broke into her apartment last night. Laptop's gone. Hard drives too. She thinks they cloned her phone. Lena felt her stomach sink. Malone? Who else? By afternoon, the smear campaign had begun. Riley's name was plastered across the evening news, accused of fabricating sources, doctoring evidence in past investigations. There was even a photo of her leaving the freight yard with Eli, grainy but clear enough to ignite speculation. She's the link, Eli muttered. If she goes down, every story she's touched, including ours, gets poisoned. They had two options: disappear again, or double down and make Malone pay before Riley was erased. Lena's instincts screamed to keep Maya safe, but she remembered Riley's hands shaking just slightly as she passed that envelope in the freight yard. Riley had risked everything without asking for guarantees. If we let her burn, Lena said slowly, we're exactly what Malone says. We are selfish, dangerous, out for ourselves. Eli met her eyes. And if we fight for her, we put Maya in the line of fire. Maya, sitting on the floor with Ranger's head in her lap, looked up. I don't want anyone to get hurt because of me. Lena crouched down. This isn't about you causing it. This is about us deciding who we are. That night, Eli mapped it out. They'd go after the one thing Malone couldn't afford to lose: the raw, unedited video feeds from the police department's own body cams. If they could get proof of Ranger's injury, of Malone's illegal evictions, of the staged arrests, they could bury his denials under his own evidence. But the only way in was through a secure server. Inside the precinct, Lena stared at the map of the building on the table. You're talking about walking into the lion's mouth, Eli nodded. And walking out with its teeth. Later, when Maya was asleep, Lena and Eli sat across from each other in the dim light of a single lamp. You ever think about what comes after? She asked. Eli tilted his head. After what? After this, after Malone, if we make it out. He smiled faintly. Haven't let myself. Feels like tempting fate. Lena leaned back. I think about it, not the details, just breathing without looking over my shoulder. For a moment, the weight between them was something different from fear. It was possibility. Ranger stirred, ears twitching toward the window. Outside, a car rolled slowly down the street, its headlights cutting brief, sharp shapes on the wall. The war was coming to them, whether they were ready or not. The precinct didn't look dangerous from the outside. Under the glow of street lamps, it could have been just another municipal building brick, glass, a flag snapping in the wind. But Lena knew better. Inside those walls, Malone's people worked like a machine, erasing what needed erasing, bending. What needed bending. They approached from the back, where a loading dock faced an alley littered with cigarette butts and the smell of diesel. Eli moved first, his hand steady on the small lockpicking kit. Lena kept watch, her heartbeat matching the slow metallic clicks. Riley's voice crackled softly in Eli's earpiece. 2 guards on rotation inside the service hall. You'll have maybe 90 seconds between shifts. The lock gave with a faint snap. They slipped in. The building had that antiseptic chill Lena remembered from hospitals, mixed with the faint tang of industrial cleaner. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The silence was almost worse than noise. They moved quickly, their footsteps swallowed by the cheap tile floors. At every corner, Lena expected to see Malone himself waiting. When they reached the records room, Eli swiped a stolen keycard, one Riley had gotten from a source who clearly hadn't asked too many questions. The door clicked open, revealing rows of metal cabinets, and in the far corner, the hum of a server rack. "This is it," Eli whispered. The server's interface was bare bones, but Eli's fingers flew across the keyboard. "We're looking for incident reports, K9 unit logs, eviction notices. If it's ugly, we take it." On the screen, lines of text scrolled like falling rain. Lena stood behind him, scanning for anything that matched Ranger's injury date. "There," she said, pointing. Eli opened the file. The report was sanitized, no mention of bait operations, no direct tie to Malone. But attached was a single unedited clip from a body cam, Ranger lunging forward. A sharp command shouted, then a yelp cut off mid-sound. Lena's jaw tightened. "Copy it." They were halfway through downloading when Riley's voice came sharp in their ears. "You've got company." One of the guards broke rotation. 30 seconds. Eli's hands blurred. Files filled the drive, videos, reports, memos. Lena scanned the doorway, adrenaline flooding her system. The footsteps came before the shadow, a uniformed officer rounding the corner. "Hey, what are you?" Lena moved on instinct, stepping forward just enough to block the officer's view of Eli. "I'm lost," she said quickly, forcing a nervous laugh. "Was just looking for the restroom." The man's eyes narrowed. His hand twitched toward his radio. Eli yanked the drive free. "Go." They bolted, Ranger's absence like an ache. He was with Maya back at the hideout, safer there. The guard's voice rose behind them, the sharp bark of "stop" echoing down the hall. They burst out into the alley, feet slapping wet asphalt, hearts pounding. A block away, a dark sedan rolled up, the back door swinging open to reveal Riley at the wheel. "Get in," she shouted. Inside the car, the air smelled of coffee and wet wool. Ayla clutched the drive like it was made of glass. Riley didn't waste time with questions. She just hit the gas. In the rearview mirror, Lena caught a glimpse of the precinct shrinking behind them. But she knew they hadn't left the danger there. It was riding with them now, in the form of every file Malone would kill to erase. Riley didn't speak the entire drive. Not until they'd turned off the main road, past the last stretch of city lights, did she slow down. Ailey was still clutching the hard drive like it might vanish if he loosened his grip. Lena sat in the back, eyes on the passing shadows, watching street lamps thin out until the night swallowed everything. When they pulled into the abandoned warehouse lot, Riley cut the engine and turned in her seat. "We can't take this back to the old place. If Malone traces the signal, none of us will be safe." Eli gave a short nod and stepped out first, scanning the shadows before setting up a folding table and his battered laptop in a dark corner. Wind hissed through the loose metal siding. Lena leaned against a wooden beam, arms folded, as Riley unzipped her bag and pulled out a compact decryption rig. The rumble of engines grew louder, headlights slicing across the warehouse door. Eli yanked the hard drive free just as the metal began to shake. Lena tightened her grip on the pack, eyes locked on the camera. This is only the beginning. Subscribe to Silent Stories and be ready. The next chapter will reveal the truth Malone never wanted the world to see.